Hello everyone, my name is Jimmy Smith and welcome to episode number 46 of the Rambler podcast, where we are passionate about sharing what makes Cathedral Prep the standard of excellence. On this episode of the podcast, we're thrilled to have Brian Markley on as a guest. Brian attended Holy Rosary Grade School and then went on to Cathedral Prep, where he graduated in 1989. He then received his degree in medical technology from Edinburgh and completed his teaching certificate in secondary biology in 2000 and secondary chemistry in 2013. Currently, Brian teaches chemistry, AP chemistry, freshman seminar, and the universe. He is also the science department chair, faculty mentor, member of the AAC and safety committees, and junior class advisor. Brian also was previously an assistant wrestling coach for Prep from 2000 to 2019. Brian married his wife Melissa in 1998 and is currently a parishioner at St. George. And I also had Brian as a teacher during my time at Prep. Yes, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on. It's fun doing the podcast episodes with people who I had as a teacher, because it's one thing to work with you and then now kind of talk about your time at Prep and whatnot.
Well, it's great from my end, too, because I finally get to see where everybody ends up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And it's got to be a pretty neat experience, too, as alum, come back, visit the school, now that you've been here for so many different years. I mean, probably feels like yesterday that...
It flies by. It does, So, and that's part, I don't know. I mean, I remember that. I remember that age a lot, and I remember a lot of the angst and the problems. So I think I still kind of feel a kinship with what they're going through.
Yeah.
So I think it's good experience. So I think I get stuck in that time, so you forget that you're actually an older person now.
That is true. Once you are working for the school, you kind of just remember all these things like yesterday.
Yes, absolutely.
Talk to us about why you decided to attend Prep at the time.
Actually, it was kind of funny because when I was a student, Candy Prep was still open and while I was in grade school, and it was a consideration. Candy Prep closed, and it wasn't something that I thought I would go there or not. But then after that point, and when I was in I don't know, it was middle school someplace, I just never thought there was another thing that I would even consider. My parents did not force us to go anywhere. We did get to choose. They were happy that we chose to go to Prep. They had to work pretty hard to put us through here, but they did want us to get the best education. So
yeah,
I don't know. I think the other thing that it weighed into my decision is at that point I was still pretty heavily into wrestling and competing, and I wanted to wrestle for a good school.
Yeah, very cool. And when you look back at your time as a student of Prep, I mean, what are some of the things that really made it special for you as a...
Well, I was actually thinking about this because you'd sent me the question, and there are some things I think some things are so funny I would rather omit those, just like probably most high school kids would. But when I'm really thinking about it, I think back, it's I remember riding the bus or driving to school with my buddies. I remember the lunch table, spending that time. I remember, walking to football games. We used to live on the east side and was within walking distance. We had a big crew that walked. So I remember sitting in the hallway before school, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I do remember a lot of my teachers. I do remember when I was here as a student that I was really, obviously I knew that I was leaning towards science. I always knew that I was leaning in that direction.
Yeah.
But I also too was really interested in a lot of the theology classes that we got, not just because it was it was more than in grade school, just, giving you catechism and here's how the faith is, but it got more to embracing and thinking and engaging. And I thought those classes were pretty interesting. So I had a lot of wonderful teachers while I was here. Two still are here that I'm aware of, if I count right, Mr. Achille and Father McCormick, and I had them both.
Yeah.
So I was pretty blessed, and yeah. So my time here was pretty good time.
Yeah. Now you fast forward all these years, you're one of the staples here as a teacher.
Been around for a few years, yeah.
You're one of the...
Collecting dust, yeah.
A lot of times when I catch up with people I graduated with, they're so who are the teachers that are still here? And I'm honestly, not many. I think we kind of were at that tail end of teachers who had been here for so long that were beginning to retire. Yeah. But of course, I'm always mentioning your name. And everyone's always happy to hear that you're still here. And
it's a wonderful life. It really is. I it's funny because I never knew that I would be a teacher. I ended up here, and being here every day, I think, is just the greatest way that I can spend my time, because there's more than just teaching chemistry. There's more than the concepts that we're trying to teach. There's much more about just developing character and people and letting kids be kids and letting them screw up and, teaching them why that's wrong. And, I like that whole, I think I'm just made for that. I have a lot of patience for young kids. So I don't think I get burned out on it just because I kind of feed off of it a little bit.
You kind of have to as a teacher.
If you don't, it's a hard job. Yeah, definitely.
That's funny. And you said you kind of like fell into it a little bit. How did you even start teaching at prep? How did that all come about?
Yeah, it's funny. I never considered being a teacher. So when I went off to college, I knew I was doing something in science, and I went off and I got my degree in medical technology, which is basically anybody who's ever been to to a hospital and you've taken a sample, blood, whatever it may be, they send it to the lab. I was that guy. I was I did blood banking, all that fun stuff, and I liked it, and it was a good job. And I worked out of town for a couple of years. Moved back to Erie. Was working at a local lab in toxicology, and it just started to get pretty monotonous. It's a good job, but I would say it's a lot like a very clean McDonald's. You have orders come in, orders go out. But one of the things that I did like about the job was that we had students from St. Vincent's that were training to become med techs would come down, and we would train students, and everybody would be like, okay, students here, who wants them? And everybody would scatter, and I'd be like, yeah, I'll take this student. I like this student. So I got married, and after I got married, my wife and I were talking. She's like, why don't you go back to school? Because she was a little frustrated with my shift work and everything, and it looked like that was going to be a ways for a while. She knew I wasn't like personally fulfilled in the job. I was, financially it was fine. So I'm like, go to school. Yeah, you're nuts, whatever. And we talked about it. And eventually it's like starting to dawn on me that maybe I would like to teach, I always had kids tell me that that's something I like to do. I tutored people in high school. I tutored people in college. I have teachers in my family. And the course that introduced me to medical technology was like a aptitude, ability, interest kind of survey class. And teaching came up on that, and I didn't recall that until I found that form many, many years later, and I was already teaching.
Wow. So
anyhow, I went back to teach, and the first professor I have says, hey, if you want to get a job teaching with kids, you better get involved with kids. And I'm like, well, that makes sense. So I go to my wife and I tell her that, and she says, hey, there was just something in the bulletin at St. George about wanting to volunteer coach. And I think, well, I can do that with little kids. I haven't wrestled since 10th grade. I was not an overly accomplished wrestler, but I'm going to help little kids, sure. So I went up there and I met a good bunch of people, good bunch of families that followed me through here at Prep too. And I volunteered for the 2 years I was back in school. And funny enough, when I got a call from Mrs. Mullen to get the job, that was part of the plan. It was that they wanted somebody that would be an assistant coach in the building. I wasn't being hired for my wrestling prowess or expertise. It was more to be like the mom in the building, just to help with the wrestlers, because wrestling's pretty complicated when it comes to managing weight and all that kind of stuff. So they just wanted somebody there to facilitate and help. So that's kind of how I ended up in it.
That's really neat.
Yeah, it was a kind of roundabout way to get here.
Yeah. And it's funny how, like, I always knew you as the assistant wrestling coach, and it's, Mrs. Mullen hiring you on for that purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you played a big role because so many wrestlers have come through the school, and it is such a dynamic, tough sport that the kids, like you were mentioning, having to maintain their weights and all that stuff. So,
yeah, and wrestlers are an interesting personality too. I mean, we not all of us are like me and like to study and do book things, and but they're feisty kids. I mean, that's partly why they're out there, is because they they got something to prove for themselves, and so just teaching them how to manage. The mat's the mat, and this is classroom, and let's keep everything in order, because that was more my job on the team, was more like the making sure the ship ran, as opposed to teaching kind of technique and stuff, because we had so many other people that are qualified to do that.
Yeah, to be that person between the school and the team,
doing a lot of that.
Kids.
Yep.
Very neat. And so as you started teaching here at Prep, was it kind of surreal in those first couple of years? Like, wow, I'm teaching at the school.
I'll be honest, it was surreal to a degree.
Yeah.
It's also can be one of the most crushing things. It's really, I don't know that people really know how hard it can be to teach. Like any profession, it takes time to develop your craft, so that when you're new, everything's novice, and you have a lot of expectations from the people that you're serving. all the teachers that I know, have the first years are pretty rough. Those are painful. But once you get through those, then it can start to be fun. Then you can start paying attention to the refining and learning more than just about how to present material, learning more about what's important to kids and what's really important in their lives, and what are you trying to really ultimately accomplish other than your content.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Yeah, I bet that could definitely be, and I've always heard kind of the joke, especially teaching here at Prep, if they can make it through the first couple years here at Prep, they'll be good, right?
Yes, the first years are tough, and it's just, well, when I started here too, it was all boys, so
right.
that was definitely a different environment, and like, I never really, I think having the Prep experience as a student, I was really well prepared for that, so that wasn't the part that I found challenging, like, so much dealing with the kids, because I knew what I was getting into. I mean, it wasn't long. I mean, it was only about a decade before after I graduated that I started back here.
Yeah.
So I was prepared for that, but just for all the other things you have to do, because like everybody sees, oh, you teach classes, but there's so much more that goes into the teaching than just that. So like learning to balance all that's a challenge. But you're right. Once you hit the couple years into it, it gets a lot easier. It really does. And it gets more rewarding too. People start to know who you are, start to not doubt you, start to trust you, because you have to build a reputation. Sure. Wherever you go, it takes time to do that. And, I was very aware of that too, from, professors that I'd had in college, and, just come in here and you have to know what your expectations are, and you have to set them, and you have to stick to them. And if you do that, most kids will respect you for being honest and forthright.
Right.
But still, it's still a minefield. It's a lot of work.
Oh, no doubt. And you mentioned earlier that you always really kind of leaned towards science, even when you were a student. What was it about science that really ultimately drew your attention more so than maybe other subjects?
Well, I think it's funny, because the thing that I also said too at that same time was the theology, and I think it's also just the fact that I don't know, some people, I know many people do, but maybe me more than most, are always looking for those answers, right? And so, faith is one way to explore that. I also tried, when I was younger, naively, try to explore those questions through science, and it took me a long time to realize how mutually exclusive they are. But nonetheless, I still have that interest to just want to know. I just want to know what's out there. I just want to know how things work. I want to know, what has humanity, what conclusions has humanity come to? I mean, those things are big questions to me. I want to know those things.
Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty fascinating stuff, and I always appreciated, like, being a student in one of your classes, you really help make things easy to understand, because I was not a science person by any means, so it was difficult for me going through science classes, but you're always super willing to help break things down and to make it smaller pieces of a pie, to help put together. And so really appreciate, taking that complex of what science could be. When you're a 10th grader going through some courses, it gets very vast and tough to understand for some people.
Well, I'll tell you, I appreciate you saying that, because I'll be honest, what I spend a lot of my time on, and it's funny because I think my whole life is like this now, is explaining things through analogy, trying to get them to link something that they already know. So it's just something that I started doing when I was early teaching, trying to make analogies, try to get to something. And now I feel like I'm speaking in analogies and metaphors all the time, because I'm always trying to, just draw it to something else. Because anybody who would think that you could throw a 10th grader, 11th grader down with a chemistry book and say, hey, go learn it, good luck. Let alone an adult. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that, like, if somebody can walk you through it a little bit and boil it down to, look, all this craziness you're doing is just the same thing as you did when you did this.
Right.
And once you start to see the similarity, then it becomes more manageable. My ultimate goal, like, it depends on who I'm teaching. Like when it comes to chemistry, lately last couple of years, I've done academics and AP. And with the academics, I mean, I'm of the mindset, this is their probably one and only shot they're going to get at chemistry. I could make this a horrible experience or a good experience. What do I want them to walk out with? I want them to understand how the world works. You know what I mean? I want them to understand that this is stuff that, like, we understand there's causes and there's effects, and we can see them. That's what I want them to get. Now, when it comes to the AP kids, I'm gonna push them pretty hard. It's a little different. But especially for those academic kids, I am not looking. I don't have the expectation that many of them are going to go off and take a chemistry major in college. All right.
Right.
But I also want that kid that's taking my chemistry class to know whether or not they could go off to college and take chemistry. And so I try and make them understand that, like, hey, if you're getting an A in this academic chemistry class, you can do it.
Yeah.
You know, if you're getting a B, yeah, you can do it. If you're getting a C, you might want to think about something different.
Right.
You know?
Yes.
And not to be mean, but just
Correct.
Hey, we got to go with our aptitudes. We got to go with our abilities. But yeah, that's kind of like, it depends on, you know, what class I'm teaching and what the thrust is. But
yeah. Well, I did not pursue chemistry in college, so.
Well, if I recall, Jimmy, you weren't a bad student, though.
No, I got by, right?
Yes, you did
but
just fine, yeah.
But I did identify it wasn't for me to pursue it at the next level.
True.
So, yeah, no, I definitely appreciated having you as a teacher, because you did do exactly that. Is, you know, you helped create those connections and make things easier to understand than, you know, otherwise could have been. And, you know, we were talking a little bit about, you know, starting off teaching. Talk to us a little about being a wrestling coach, you know, how that was for you. I know you said you weren't the most technical on the side of the mat, but just that experience, you know, having those times as a...
Well, it's pretty amazing is because, you know, like I wrestled in grade school, I wrestled in high school, and I made varsity prep freshman, sophomore year at a week weight. Okay, so it was not, you know, maybe by senior year I could have been okay, but by that point I was used to being beat down because like first two freshman and sophomore year I took a lot of lickings and I was sick of it, and you know, girlfriend job seemed much more appealing at the time. So like I didn't go that far with it in my personal stuff. So then I go volunteer and I'm helping, you know, little kids and stuff. And then I got hired at prep, and the thing is that like this is like real deal. Like we are a good team.
Yeah.
We've always been a good team. We were coming off the mid 90s where we had some slew of state champs. To come in and to spend the 19 years that I got to spend here, and the things that I saw over those years, I mean, I've seen some of the best wrestling in the world at this level. You know, literally at the world.
Yeah.
I have seen most of the Americans that are on the senior circuit right now, competing for the nation. I got to see as high school kids. You know, some of them I saw as freshmen in high school.
Yeah.
So I've seen amazing wrestling. I got to witness Carter Shiraki. I mean, you know, he could possibly be one of the best wrestlers that ever existed. I mean, literally,
Correct.
You know. And I also coached a whole boatload of kids who maybe didn't have those accolades, but that are great people, and I had great relationships with, and you know, it made mopping a lot of mats kind of worth it. You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Create those bonds over the years with the kids that, even if they're not, most people are not Carter Shiraki.
Right.
But to be able to have that relationship with those kids who work hard, are good in their own right, and compete.
Well, in all seriousness, those are the kids that I spent more time with. You know, nobody would probably itemize them by name, but those are the kids, like the kids that were maybe the novice wrestlers, the kids that hadn't been around much, the kids that are hurt, the kids that, you know, those are the kids that I usually spent some time and worked with. I didn't, you know, the really people like Carter and stuff, I'd go to Carter to have him show me something. I mean, I can be humble when I know, you know, that I'm not the person with all the answers. I mean, I think that is a good, strong trait if you know how to do it.
Yeah. That sounds like a great, you know, experiences for you.
Definitely.
Developing those relationships with those kids and, you know, being able to have that time. I mean, you were coaching for almost 20 years here, so it's pretty cool. All the kids that came through.
Absolutely. It's a lot.
So current day with prep, you know, I want to talk to you a little bit about that before we end the podcast, but we're in year 2 now of this new prep. You know, you're an alum of the school, you're teaching at the school for a long time before, you know, all this merger and co-ed prep has happened. What's been your perspective on what you've been able to see now?
I love it. I really do. You know, I'm really invested in this school. It was time. I think if we could have kept things separate and that was economically feasible, I think a lot of people would have been happier. But that's just, you got to deal with reality.
Yeah.
And so bringing everybody together, I think, was just an inevitability. Being here for a long time, I had heard that was going to happen at some point anyhow. So when it was announced, I was not shocked.
Sure.
You know, trepidation, sure. Going into the whole thing, one of the things that I was trying to be very clear about, because I was a class advisor, and we worked with the class advisors at Villa at the time. trying to make it fundamentally clear to the Villa people, and me and a couple other teachers had made this thing, is that like, we're not here to overwrite your history. We are not here to anything. We're here to embrace it. Okay. And I think once the girls realized that they were fully, equally part of this all, and I say this in jest, but not in jest, but like anybody who's married know that women have a good way of finding to get some control, right? And I'll be honest with you, I think them together in this building temper each other in many good ways. And, you know, I could go into those things, but I would just say as a whole, the kids are just a bit better behaved. And I think it's just, you know, that's just the social pressure they put on themselves.
Sure. It's
not us doing anything. It's you know, they know that they're not just around all their boys anymore. They're not all around their girls. There's other people there that might have an opinion, or they might care what their opinion is of them.
Yeah.
So in that respect, I've liked it. On the teaching end, I just love it. It makes the classroom environment a little more calm. I never taught ladies before. I never did. I'll tell you what, it's really pleasant. You know, I mean, they're very pleasant. It's just, it's a nice thing. You know, it's, you know, I've spent so much time dealing with this one age group of this one sex, and now I have both, and it's just fun dealing with both. Yeah. It really is. I've heard many teachers remark that it's like some of their favorite times. I think it's my favorite times here, and I want to temper that with, like, I have one of the biggest traverses around this building, because like we have to switch classrooms, and I've even told my boss before, like, I don't mind walking. I don't have wrestling practice anymore. I can handle walking. If you need to give anybody a long one, give it to me. And despite that, I still, that's like such a minor thing in my day that I actually enjoy the walk, actually.
Yeah.
So like, there's just so many things that have changed. The SLC, just, you know, it's, you know, I loved it. Prep cafeteria, I have many fond memories there. But when you get the choice between, do you want to sit in the basement or do you want to sit in a nice sunny area that's all new, it's nice. It's really nice, you know. So I think we've done a lot as an institution to get to this point, and I just want to see it continue to grow. I see a lot of students coming in from other schools to shadow, and these aren't just the 8th graders and stuff. I'm talking students from high schools. And I think there's good reason. I think the word's getting out. You know, we have good teachers here. We have good administrators. We have wonderful kids. You know, no place is perfect. Every place is going to have some issues, you know, because you know what? We deal with kids. There's always going to be something. But all in all, I think that I really am looking forward to I don't want to say the final phase of my career, but you know, it's the end is closer than the beginning.
Sure. Yes, and where you're at is a good spot. And you're
it's
like
a fantastic.
Where you're sitting.
Yes, absolutely.
And for people who are listening, so girls are being challenged just like the boys. Boys are being challenged like the girls. There's no question there of how academically wise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's one question that sometimes some of the Villa alums would wonder is just, will the girls be treated like the boys coming here? My
wife is a McDowell grad, so I just try and tell these kids, look, that you don't have to hate everybody. Okay. So, but my wife is a McDowell grad, and she's a pharmacist, and my wife is very intelligent, and I want all the women, young ladies that I teach to understand that I fully believe in them as much as I believe in any one of my boy students, because I'm married to a very, very intelligent woman. Yeah. And I do think it's very important that they do, girls, boys included, but the girls too, be supported to be confident in themselves, and that confidence should be based on their ability, not false confidence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, just, you know, I'm not in the school day to day, meaning working with the students, but from my, you know, position in the school, it's so exciting to see all the stuff happening. I mean, it's a very great spot that the school's in. I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't believe in what's happening here. There's just so many great things, and you're one of the reasons why. You know, like you said, all the teachers and you guys make the school what it is. You know, and I appreciated that for my time here. And if it wasn't for the teachers being here with the students, there's, you know, what are we doing?
It's true,
right?
It's true.
So, but you know, all honesty, you know, we appreciate the work you're doing here, really do. And I just have one last question for you. It's a bonus one. Okay. But it's a fun one. I've been asking all the faculty and staff at the end of their podcast sessions for it. So, what does it mean to be a Rambler?
Wow, what's it mean to be a Rambler? To me, it means to be a a person with like, okay, so you could go first of all and just steal the vision, the statement.
Sure.
Okay. And I think that is honestly true. Okay. And I mean that seriously, because we want people that are going to be leaders, that are going to be leaders academically, leaders in, in knowledge and in academia. We want students that are going to be leaders in faith, that are going to be leading students to make right decisions, to make good decisions, to consider other people, to be empathetic, those kind of things, and take care of yourself. We all aspire to that, but I think we're all human, and we all understand that there are going to be times when we don't have all those three things right, and sometimes they're all going to be out of whack, but the point is that's what we're aspiring to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's good stuff. I couldn't have said it better myself. Really appreciate that. And again, we appreciate all that you're doing. Thanks for coming on the podcast, sharing with us a little bit about, how you ended up with prep and some of the stories from your teaching and wrestling days. It's fun to look back on those days.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. And like I said, it's really exciting to see when students grow up and they get into doing new things and getting to hear about former students and their growing families, and that's a wonderful thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm proud of you too, man.
Cool, appreciate that. Well, thanks for coming on again.
Thank you, Jimmy.